Whispers of the Old Stone Age. Chapter 1. The Earliest Humans. The earth was quiet when I first walked upon it, and in that silence, I felt the breath of time itself. The trees were taller then, or perhaps I was smaller, a part of the world rather than a being standing apart from it. My feet pressed into the cool soil of the forest floor, damp with dew and old leaves, soft as a cradle. Above me, the sun filtered through the branches like golden mist, warm and pale, touching my skin with fingers of light. I remember the feel of my own breath, visible in the chill of morning, the way it curled from my lips and disappeared like smoke. Around me, my kin stirred, not many of us, just a small cluster of souls, clinging to one another in the vast unknown. We had no names then, not in the way you know them. We were sounds, gestures, glances. We were the rise and fall of each other's breathing, the creak of joints in the cold, the press of hand to shoulder. I was not alone, and that meant everything. In those earliest days, life was not a pursuit of greatness, but of continuation, the daily grace of waking, the miracle of finding water, the luck of berries not yet plucked by birds. I watched the elders of our group, their faces furrowed like bark, eyes always searching, and I learned without words. I learned where the roots were sweet and when the wind meant rain. I learned the stories carved in footprints and claw marks, in broken branches and feathered dust. There was a rhythm to everything. We rose with the sun and moved as it moved, shadows long and stretching behind us. Our shelters were nothing more than lean-tos of stick and hide, our beds the earth itself, softened by moss and the warmth of others. I remember lying in the crook of my mother's side, her arm a wall of comfort, her scent like smoke and salt and fur. The night was full of sounds then, the calls of distant beasts, the rustle of unseen movement, but within her arms, I feared nothing. We did not know of gods or science, but we understood the sky. We read it like a face, learned its moods and tempers. We knew the stars, though we could not name them. They were watchers, silent and cold, always returning to the same places in the great turning of seasons. And when they vanished in clouds or storm, we waited, knowing they would return. Food was the great quest, and hunger, the great teacher. I remember watching the men return with the kill, shoulders heavy with carcass, eyes shining with triumph. We gathered around them, not just for meat, but for stories, for in the pantomime of the hunt, in the gestures and recreations, we were taught courage. We were taught the sacred dance between death and life, and the deep gratitude owed to both. Sometimes, we lost one of our own. And though we did not bury with ritual or prayer, we mourned with silence. We sat around the absence, stared into the space that person once filled. We touched the things they touched, held the warmth where they once lay. In those moments, I first felt the ache of memory, a thing heavy and invisible, a longing stitched into the bones. The children played among the roots and stones, their laughter high and wild, like the calls of small birds. I remember chasing my brother through the trees, his bare feet light on the earth, mine thudding behind. He was faster than me, always, but he waited when he knew I would fall. That was our way, the strong never walked too far from the slow. I did not know what the world was then, only that it was wide. I had not seen the great seas or the towering mountains, but I believed in them, because the old ones spoke of them with eyes that had seen. And in their stories, I traveled, over rivers that cut stone, through grasslands that rippled like water, under skies so vast they held two suns in memory. That was how we carried knowledge, in the mouths of those who remembered. It lived not in books, but in breath. Each telling was an offering, a string across generations, weaving the past into the present like the sinew of a net. And I listened, always, eyes wide, heart open. We were not the first, I learned, others had come before us. Shadows of bones in caves, handprints in ochre, fire-blackened stone. They had walked where we walked, and in their steps we found direction. We did not fear the old, we honored it, revered it, for it had endured. And so, each day, I rose from the soft earth, stepped barefoot into the waking world, and carried my small fire of life forward. I did not know the word for hope, but I knew its shape, a seed in the belly, a song in the chest, a hand held out in the dark. Chapter 2. The Use of Fire. I remember the first fire, though not the first flame. The flame was a stranger then, wild and sudden, born of sky rage and storm, cracking through the forest like a scream. We watched it from the shadows, huddled close, the scent of smoke sharp in our noses, our eyes wide and stinging. It danced and devoured, licking the trees until they fell with thunderous groans. We feared it, rightly so. But somewhere, in that fear, a seed of wonder was planted. It was not until much later that we learned to call the fire to us, to coax it like a child from stone and spark. I watched an elder, his back hunched like an old tree, crouch beside a dry bundle of grass. He held 2 stones, and with careful rhythm, struck them together. At first, I thought it was madness. He muttered softly, a chant perhaps, or simply the sound of breath working through patience. Then, a spark, a whisper of light. The grass caught, smoked, flared. We all gasped as if a star had fallen into his hands. Fire became the heart of our lives from that day on. It began as a gift for warmth. The nights were no longer teeth and wind, no longer the endless shiver that made bones ache and jaws clench. We gathered around the flames, like petals around a flower. The heat seeped into us, slow and deep. I would stretch my fingers toward it, palm open, the light flickering on my skin like sunlight through leaves. There was something soothing about the crackle and hiss, the slow turning of embers. It was a language, I thought, the voice of something ancient that had been waiting for us to listen. I would watch the sparks rise into the night like fireflies, drifting upward until they vanished into the sky. I used to imagine they became stars. But fire was more than comfort. It was safety. The beasts that once crept close, eyes glinting in the dark, breath loud and hungry, now kept their distance. The fire drew a circle around us, a wall of light and scent that even the bravest predators would not cross. It made the night feel smaller, less endless. It carved out a space where we could laugh, sleep, dream. We learned to feed it. Dry twigs, curled bark, leaves crisp with age, these became its food. And we learned its moods. If we starved it, it sulked and died. If we fed it too much, it roared and turned greedy. We tended it as one tends a child, with care and respect. When we moved camp, we carried it with us, a glowing coal wrapped in moss and bark, breathing softly in a pouch at my hip. It felt like carrying the sun. And then came the food. Before fire, we chewed raw roots until our jaws ached. We gnawed on meat that was cold and tough, sinew stubborn beneath our teeth. But with fire, food changed. It softened. It sang with scent. The first time I tasted meat kissed by flame, my mouth filled with warmth, with smoke, with something so rich and deep I wept. We all did. It felt like tasting the earth's secrets. We roasted fish, split open on stones, their skin crisping, fat sizzling. We boiled roots and hollowed out bark, adding herbs we barely knew the names of. We became cooks, though the word did not yet exist. And with each meal, we grew stronger, more alive. Fire had changed not just our world, but us. Even our stories grew longer. Before the fire, we slept early, curled beneath hides, our words short and tired. But now, we sat in circles long after the stars had risen, the fire our center. Shadows danced on the walls of caves, and in those flickers, our imagination soared. We told tales, of hunts and dreams, of the ones who came before us, and the beasts that might still be watching. We carved those tales into stone with soot and finger, preserving them in flame's light. I began to think that fire had a spirit. Not a god, not quite, we did not know gods then, but a presence. A quiet companion. I would speak to it when no one was listening, whispering my fears into its curling smoke. It never answered, but I felt heard. I would trace my fingers through the air above it, close enough to feel its breath but never close enough to burn. It taught me about balance. Fire could heal and destroy. It could cradle or consume. And so we learned humility, to never take its power lightly, to never grow arrogant. We passed this knowledge down like a song, like a sacred rhythm, carry it, respect it. And so we did. One night, as the fire crackled low and the others slept, I sat alone beneath the stars. The embers glowed beside me, soft and red, like the eyes of a gentle creature. I warmed my hands and listened to the night. In that moment, I felt the deepness of time, the ancient pull of flame and flesh, of being alive in the dark and yet not alone. Fire, I realized, was not just survival. It was belonging. Chapter 3, Stone Tools. I remember the weight of the first stone I truly saw, not just as a rock beneath my foot or a lump on the path, but as a thing with purpose. It was smooth on one side, sharp on the other, as if nature herself had paused mid-thought and left behind something half-finished. It fit my palm like it had been waiting there all along. I held it tightly and felt something shift inside me, a small, silent understanding, like a whisper in the chest. This, I realized, could change the world. Before the tools, our hands were bare and helpless against the strength of nature. We tore meat with our teeth, clawed at bark, wore the blisters of effort like badges. But when stone entered our grasp not as a burden, but as an extension of ourselves, everything changed. At first, it was instinct, smashing bone to reach the marrow, striking flint against stone to shape a sharper edge. The noise it made was sudden and bright, a clear crack like thunder trapped in a pebble. We learned to listen for it, to know the moment a flake sheared cleanly from the core. That flake, thin and fierce, could cut hide or slice through flesh smoother than even a broken tooth. It gleamed in the light, beautiful in its danger. My hands bled in those early days of learning. I remember crouching for hours, watching the old man, the one we called the breaker, as he tapped and chipped with patient rhythm. Each movement was a dance, careful and practiced, like coaxing music from a silent stone. I copied him clumsily, my fingers stung and numb by twilight. But then came a moment, just one, when I struck true, and a perfect blade flaked off into my lap. I held it up to the firelight, my breath catching. From that day on, I was never without one. We made more than blades. We made axes, heavy and purposeful, their heads lashed to wood with sinew and pitch. We made hammers, pounding roots into pulp or cracking nuts that would break teeth. We shaped scrapers to clean hides, gougers to bore holes. We made the world more manageable, more pliable. Where once our bodies were at the mercy of nature, now we shaped it, however slightly, with our minds and hands. And we made spears. I still remember my first. I chose the branch myself, long, straight, seasoned by wind and time. I stripped its bark and sharpened its tip with care, then fitted it with a chipped flint blade, binding it tightly with split vine. It felt alive in my grasp. When I threw it, clumsy at first, too fast or too low, it sang through the air. Later, when I learned to balance it just right, I felt like I was giving a part of myself to the wind. With tools, we hunted better. No longer did we rely only on chance or strength in numbers. We crept with precision. We tracked more dangerous prey. The meat was fresher, the kills cleaner, the risks less deadly. With stone in hand, we carved not just meat, but time, more time to rest, to talk, to learn. And there was art in the tools, eventually. Not in the way of color or song, but in the elegance of form. A blade perfectly shaped, symmetrical and fine-edged, was a thing to be admired. Some among us became known for their skill in flint knapping, and their hands were treated with reverence. We learned that stone had moods, some would shatter in anger, others would yield with grace. We spoke of stones as if they were alive. In some ways, they were. We traded them, too. When groups met in peace, we shared food, yes, but also tools. I once received a blade of volcanic glass, black as a night pool and sharper than breath. It had come from far away, they told me, beyond the river lands, where the earth cracked open in fire. I held it gently, humbled by its path to me. Our children learned early. I watched my son, barely old enough to walk well, crouched beside a shard, pressing it into clay. He mimicked what he'd seen, not understanding yet, but feeling the pull of it, the ancient call to shape, to change. I did not stop him. Let his hands speak the language we all once learned. At night, by the fire, I would hold my blade and turn it over slowly, its edge catching the flicker of flame. I wondered how long it would last, how many cuts it could make before dullness took it back into stone's long slumber. But I also wondered what it meant, that we had changed the stone, and that the stone had changed us. For with every tool we made ourselves. And in that quiet, gentle transformation, in the hands shaping stone and the stone shaping lives, I felt something deep and old and right. Not progress, but partnership. Chapter 4, Nomadic Life. The wind has always been our companion. It moves through us like memory, brushing against skin and hair, whispering through the branches, across the grasses, into the open spaces of the world where we wander. It has no home, and so it understands us. For we, too, belong to no single place. I was born beside a river, beneath trees that reached up like fingers toward the sky. The earth there was soft, water slick and mossy, and I remember the way my mother's voice sounded, low and humming, as she washed roots in the stream. But we did not stay. The river changed. The fish moved on. So did we. I have lived in many places, in the shadow of great stone cliffs, where echoes lived longer than we did, in open plains where the wind rolled low and steady like an animal too large to see, in the hush of pine forests, where needles carpeted the floor and every footstep was swallowed into silence. And each place, in its own way, welcomed us. Until it didn't. That is the way of the nomad. We move not because we are lost, but because we listen. To the land. To the animals. To the rhythm of growth and death. We follow the warmth when the cold becomes cruel. We chase the herds, for they feed us with flesh and bone and hide. We avoid the floods, the rot, the places where life sours. We are not bound to the land, but bound with it, as a bird is to the air or a fish to the current. There is freedom in this. There is also sorrow. Each place we leave carries a part of us. I can close my eyes and still see the circle of stones we once arranged around a fire beside the sea, where salt crusted on our skin and gulls called from above. I can remember the scent of herbs growing in a high meadow we passed through once, their fragrance rising with the morning dew. These places do not vanish. They live inside us, quiet and whole. We do not build walls. We do not stay long enough for seeds to sprout. But we mark time differently. In footprints and fire pits, in the grooves worn into our walking sticks. In the children who grow taller with each migration, their legs growing strong from miles walked in sunlight and storm. I watched my daughter learn to walk as we moved across a wide grassland. She fell often, then less so, until one morning I turned and saw her ahead of me, barefoot and sure-footed, chasing after her brother's laughter. The sun crowned her hair in gold. The path, though unseen, opened before her. In that moment, I understood that movement is not absence, it is becoming. There is no word in our tongue for home the way you might know it. For us, home is where we are together. It is the circle we make when we sit close at night. It is the warmth of bodies, the smell of cooked meat, the sound of stories told again and again until they are part of the bones. Home is not a place. It is a state of being. A closeness. A presence. The world, in its vastness, is our house. We know the stars better than most, for they are our only ceiling. I have slept beneath every phase of the moon, full and bright, or thin as a whisper. I have watched it rise over ridges, over deserts, over frozen fields where even the air dared not move. Each sky is different, and yet it is always the same sky. That comforts me. And when we find others, travelers like ourselves, we greet them with food, with stories, with the showing of scars. We share what we have seen, what we have survived. These moments are brief but rich. And then, just as gently, we part. No tether, no promise. Only a nod, and the knowledge that paths may cross again, or not. It is enough. There is beauty in impermanence. At times, I wonder what it would feel like to stop. To stay in one place long enough to watch a tree grow taller each year, to know the shape of every stone. But then I remember the restlessness in my chest, the way it stirs when the wind shifts. I was born to move. We all were. Our lives are not written in stone but carried on the soles of our feet. In worn sandals, in calloused toes, in the ache of muscles well used. We are the rhythm of walking. The echo of laughter down a long trail. The hush of breathing under stars. We are the story passed from fire to fire, the handprint left behind on stone not to claim, but to remember. Even now, as I grow older, slower, I do not dread the journey. My legs may tire, but my spirit does not. I rise each morning with the same question, not where are we, but where to next. And the land, always listening, always patient, answers in its own time. So I walk. One step, then another. Not to escape. Not to arrive. But to belong, everywhere, and always.